So, um, imagine stepping into this retrofitted living room, right? You pretend it's 1959 for just 7 days.
Yeah, just a single week.
And you walk out with objectively better hearing, sharper eyesight, and your biological age has literally reversed. I mean, it sounds like a premise for a sci-fi movie.
It really does, but it's an actual documented Harvard medical study.
Right, because we usually treat the brain and the body like they're two completely separate entities. Like you have your physical health over here, your muscles, your joints.
Well, exactly, the physical stuff.
Yeah, and then your cognitive health is just locked away in a little vault inside your skull. But if you look at the actual science, that separation is, well, it's a complete illusion.
It is entirely an illusion. I mean, the body and the brain are a single continuous system. Every single physical input you provide to your body, whether it's how you move, the light you look at, or how you process stress,
Right.
it's all immediately translated into a neurochemical language that your brain has to interpret. They share the same fuel, the same clocks, and, the same vulnerabilities.
Well, welcome to your custom-tailored deep dives into the foundations of vitality, specifically protocols for cognitive and physical longevity.
Yeah, we've got some amazing sources today.
We really do. If you are someone who absolutely loves to learn, who wants the absolute best strategies for your health, but you're just, completely exhausted by the endless information overload out there, consider this your ultimate cheat sheet.
Because there is so much noise out there.
So much noise.
Yeah.
Our mission today is to cut through all of that. We are going to extract the exact, highly specific protocols that act as a shortcut to optimizing your brain health and literally reversing biological aging.
And we're going to start with the most intense physical input possible, right? And then work our way all the way down to the cellular and psychological level.
Let's do it. So that intense physical input, we're talking about movement.
But not just any movement. Counterintuitively, the research shows that the absolute best way to train your brain's most complex, sophisticated functions isn't through, brain games. Yeah, it's actually by moving very heavy, primitive physical loads.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because when we hear exercise for longevity, I think most of us immediately picture, light jogging, or maybe those low-weight, high-rep toning classes.
Sure, yeah.
Are you saying a moderate jog isn't the best thing for the brain?
I mean, cardio has its place, certainly for cardiovascular health, but the sources are pointing to a totally different protocol for cognitive longevity. We are talking about heavy resistance training.
Heavy resistance, okay.
The protocol specifically calls for lifting at about 80% of your maximum capacity for lower repetitions, so around 5 to 6 reps.
That's pretty heavy.
It is, and what's fascinating here is that the primary beneficiary of this intense exertion isn't actually your biceps. It is your prefrontal cortex.
The prefrontal cortex. Wait, that's the part of our brain responsible for complex cognition, decision-making, and logic?
Exactly, the executive center.
So lifting heavy is less about building biceps for the beach and more like, forcing your prefrontal cortex to do heavy Sudoku.
That is an incredible analogy. And biologically, it is spot on. When you lift heavy loads, you are doing much more than just mechanically tearing muscle fibers.
Okay, what else is happening?
You're creating a very specific type of intense metabolic stress. And that stress creates a byproduct called lactate.
Lactate, like lactic acid.
Right. Now, for decades, sports science thought of lactate just as a waste product. We thought it was just the annoying stuff that makes your muscles burn and fatigue.
Right, the stuff you try to massage out after a really hard workout.
Exactly. But we now know that your brain actually prefers lactate as a fuel source over glucose. It absolutely thrives on it.
Wait, really? Over glucose?
Yeah. When that lactate is produced by heavy lifting, it crosses the blood-brain barrier. And when the brain uses lactate for energy, it acts as a highly efficient fuel that actively helps clear out metabolic debris.
What kind of debris?
Specifically, it helps reduce the buildup of amyloid and tau proteins in the brain.
Hold on, amyloid and tau proteins. Those are the exact plaques and tangles associated with cognitive decline, right? Like dementia and Alzheimer's.
Precisely. So by lifting heavy, you aren't just getting stronger, you are literally fueling a neurological cleanup crew. You are actively taking out the metabolic trash that causes your brain to age.
That is wild.
There is a massive randomized control trial out of the UK that proved this. They looked at adults over 60 and found that lifting heavy loads specifically improved neural connectivity in that prefrontal cortex.
Just from the heavy lifting?
Yes, but here is the critical part. Moderate intensity lifting did not yield those same specific brain benefits.
Wow. So if I'm just doing the light dumbbells, I'm not triggering the cleanup crew.
No, you weren't. Dr. Stacy Sims points this out in her research as well. You actually have to send the intense signal to get the neurological reward.
The heavy load is the trigger.
Right, it's the trigger for neuroplasticity.
But what if someone is listening to this and thinking, I'm in my 60s, I've never lifted heavy a day in my life, I just missed the boat entirely.
The human machine is remarkably responsive, regardless of when you start. The sources highlight the story of Dr. Mark Hyman.
Oh, I've heard of him.
Yeah, he was a lifelong runner, just the classic endurance cardio guy. But at age 59, he transitioned entirely to heavy strength training.
At 59.
At 59. And by the time he was 62, he achieved radical physical and metabolic transformations.
No way.
Yes, his muscle mass, his bone density, and his overall metabolic health were vastly superior in his 60s than they were in his 40s when he was just running.
That is just wild. So you are basically building a bigger, stronger metabolic engine to protect your cognitive hard drive.
Exactly. Macro exertion moving heavy iron is the foundation. It beneficially stresses the body.
Right.
But that brings up a crucial secondary challenge. Heavy lifting is a stress we choose. But what about the stresses we don't choose?
You mean the daily grind? The invisible stresses that just silently wear us down over the course of a day?
Yes. We need to move from macro exertions to micro interventions. Physiotherapist Will Harlow has a brilliant concept for this called exercise snacks.
Exercise snacks. I love the sound of that. How does that work?
They're these tiny 30 to 60-second interventions, and they are designed to manage those physical and neurological micro stresses.
Okay.
The most prominent one is simply practicing your balance. So standing on one leg or walking an imaginary tightrope in your kitchen while you're brushing your teeth or, waiting for the kettle to boil.
All right, I have to be honest and push back here a little bit on behalf of the listener. We just went from deadlifting 80% of our maximum capacity to standing on one foot while waiting for coffee water to heat up.
It sounds like a huge leap, I know.
Are you telling me that can actually extend my lifespan? That almost sounds too easy to be true.
It sounds deceptively simple.
Mm-hmm.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, it is fundamentally profound for your longevity. Think about how balance actually works.
Okay.
It isn't just about muscle strength in your legs. It relies heavily on your vestibular system, that's the delicate mechanisms in your inner ear, and something called proprioception.
Proprioception, remind me what that is.
Proprioception is your brain's internal 3D map of where your body is in space. It's how you can touch your nose with your eyes closed.
Oh, right, okay.
As you age, if you don't actively test those neuromuscular connections, that map starts to fade. Your brain literally loses track of your limbs.
That sounds terrifying.
It is. By introducing these brief daily exposures, these balance snacks, you force your nervous system to constantly recalibrate its orientation. You are essentially hardening your reflexes against tripping.
Okay, that makes sense. And I imagine the data on tripping and falling as we get older is pretty severe.
It is terrifying. There was a major study called the LIFE trial, which looked at older adults.
What did they find?
It showed that simply incorporating these brief balance intervals improved their objective balance scores by 31% over just 12 weeks.
Wow, 31%.
Yeah, and that equated to an average of one less fall per year per person. And the longevity impact is staggering. 50% of people over the age of 50 fall every single year.
Every year.
Yes. And of those who suffer a hip fracture from a fall, 30% die within a year.
Wait, 30%?
30%.
That is sobering. So losing your balance doesn't just mean a bruised knee. It is a primary driver of mortality.
Exactly. The sources detail a case study of older patients with low blood pressure who suffered from dizziness.
Okay.
Because they felt unsteady, they lost their confidence, they became housebound, and then they rapidly lost all their physical strength. It's a vicious cycle.
Oh, that makes total sense.
But just introducing these short, balanced snacks restored their confidence to navigate the world safely. It literally breaks the cycle of fear and physical decline.
Okay, so we need physical balance to stay upright. But what about psychological balance?
Yeah.
Because, I know my brain feels completely disconnected from my body when my inbox is overflowing and I'm stuck in traffic.
That is the exact parallel. Just as we use physical exercise snacks, we need psychological fire breaks.
Fire breaks.
Yes, Dr. Pippa Grange and Dr. Rangan Chatterjee explore this deeply. They talk about how the modern world constantly feeds us what they call microstress doses, or MSDs.
MSDs, like every email ping, every traffic jam, every urgent text message.
Exactly. It all adds up.
And I'm guessing our bodies weren't designed to handle 100 urgent text messages a day.
Not at all. The autonomic nervous system is simply not designed to handle a continuous stream of MSDs without a break.
Right?
When you are constantly rushing, you are trapped in sympathetic overdrive. That is your fight or flight state. Cortisol and adrenaline are chronically elevated.
Which is exhausting.
It is. If you force your nervous system into a monoculture of high stress without ever deliberately shifting into the parasympathetic rest and digest state, systemic exhaustion is inevitable.
Like running a car engine at the red line all day long.
Exactly. Eventually, a gasket blows.
So how do we put in a fire brake to stop the engine from blowing?
One of the most effective protocols is the Hera practice. It takes exactly 1 minute. Yeah. You place a hand on your heart and a hand on your belly. You close your eyes, and you physically check in with your internal state to consciously drop your mental pace out of that urgent mode.
Oh, wow.
It manually forces your nervous system out of fight or flight.
It seems so incredibly subtle. Does a 1-minute breathing pause actually change the trajectory of your day?
It does. The research highlights the story of a man named Merlin. He was a highly successful surgeon and tech entrepreneur.
High-stress job, then.
Oh, very. On paper, he was thriving, but internally, he constantly felt this overwhelming sense of wrongness in his career. He was redlining his nervous system every single day.
So what did he do?
Well, by dropping his ego and his sunk cost mentality and actually implementing these regular internal check-ins, he stopped overriding his body's warning signals.
Just with those pauses.
Yeah, he learned to toggle between his sympathetic and parasympathetic states, and he completely avoided a catastrophic burnout.
That's incredible. So we've got heavy lifting for macro stress, balanced snacks for neuromuscular mapping, and 1-minute fire breaks for our stress hormones. We are actively managing our days.
We are.
But if we spend all day managing our nervous system, what happens when we go to sleep? Do we just shut off, or is there a specific protocol for nighttime recovery?
To really lock in all the physical and mental gains we just discussed, your body requires a perfect calibration of its master clocks.
Master clock.
And those master clocks are driven by 2 highly specific inputs, light and vitamin D.
Let's start with light. I know we're supposed to avoid screens, but what is the actual biological protocol here?
Dr. Matthew Walker, Dr. Michael Gradisar, and Dave Asprey all point to a very strict light architecture.
Strict how?
First, you must expose your eyes to bright outdoor sunlight before 10 a.m. Second, keep your evening lights below 10 lux using dimmers or very low wattage lamps for 3 hours before bed.
3 hours.
Yeah. And finally, maintain a strict 90-minute bedtime window, even on the weekends.
Okay, that is strict. Why?
The reason for this comes down to specialized cells in your eyes called melanopsin cells.
So what does this all mean? If I'm understanding the biology right, these melanopsin cells don't actually help us see shapes or read words, right?
Correct.
So are they basically just tiny biological security guards that only care if the sun is up, and they completely ignore whatever TV show we're actually looking at on our screens?
That is a perfect description. Their sole job is to measure photon intensity and report back to the suprachiasmatic nucleus.
The what?
The suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is your brain's master clock, they just tell the brain, is it day or is it night?
Oh.
When you get that bright morning light, it sets an anchor. It starts a 12 to 14-hour biological timer for when sleep-inducing melatonin will be released.
Okay, but what happens when I turn on the bright overhead lights in my living room at 9 p.m.?
This is where modern living destroys our biology. A study of 116 adults proved that ordinary room light, just 200 lux, which is a standard living room lamp, delayed and suppressed melatonin release by 71%.
Hold on. 71%. Just from a normal living room lamp.
Yes. Your evening living room is tricking your master clock into thinking it is 2 p.m. in the afternoon.
That explains so much.
The sources share the story of a 38-year-old woman named Jessica. She thought she had perfect sleep hygiene, no caffeine late in the day. She took all the right magnesium supplements. She tracked her sleep on an app.
Doing everything right, supposedly.
Right, but she was chronically exhausted.
So what fixed it?
All she did to fix it was open her blackout curtains first thing in the morning to get that bright sunlight, and she completely stopped using bright overhead lights at night.
And that worked.
Suddenly, her sleep onset shifted earlier by 20 minutes, and her fragmented sleep completely disappeared. It wasn't the supplements she needed, it was the light signaling.
Does this actually affect our long-term health, or does it just make us groggy the next day?
The long-term consequences are severe. A Danish study tracked 3,000 adults over a decade. They found that individuals with highly irregular bedtimes and short sleep durations literally doubled their risk of major cardiovascular events.
Doubled, just from irregular sleep.
Yes. Keeping your vascular biology on a predictable, light-anchored schedule reduces that heart attack risk by up to 50%.
Wow. Okay, so light is the first anchor for our master clocks. What is the second one?
The second input is vitamin D3. Shawn Stevenson's protocol recommends 2,000 IUs of vitamin D3 daily, combined specifically with vitamin K2.
Okay, I've heard of vitamin D, but why the specific push for adding vitamin K2? What does that do?
It's a crucial partnership. Vitamin D helps your body absorb calcium, but without K2, that calcium can end up deposited in your soft tissues or your arteries, which you definitely don't want. Vitamin K2 acts like a traffic cop. It ensures the calcium gets directed straight into your bones.
Oh, that's incredibly important.
But beyond that, vitamin D is actually a prohormone. It works at a genetic level to entrain those same circadian clocks we were just discussing.
Really? A hormone?
Yes. It is also crucial for the production of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, in the hippocampus. BDNF acts like a fertilizer for memory and cognitive function.
And the results of getting this right are incredible. There was a massive 4-year study by Harvard researchers that found supplementing with 2,000 IUs of D3 daily reduced the rate of biological cellular aging by the equivalent of 3 years.
Yes.
The subjects taking D3 essentially turned back their phenotypic clocks.
Exactly.
Wait, phenotypic clocks. I know what a biological clock is, but what does phenotypic mean in plain English?
Great question. So your genotype is the DNA code you were born with. You can't change that.
Right.
But your phenotype is how those genes are actually expressed based on your environment and lifestyle. So turning back your phenotypic clock means you are literally forcing your cells to express themselves as if they were 3 years younger.
That is wild.
And the subjects taking a placebo showed absolutely no change in their rate of aging. If you get the light right and the D3 right, your body knows exactly what time it is, and it can deploy its repair mechanisms perfectly.
That is amazing. But let's be real for a second. Life happens.
Always.
You can't always have perfect sleep hygiene. You have red-eye flights, you have sudden work deadlines, you have a baby waking up at 3 a.m. Sometimes that master clock just gets smashed.
It's inevitable.
What do we do then? Do we just accept the damage?
No, we need an emergency buffer. And this brings us to an intervention from Dave Asprey's protocol using 10 to 15 grams of creatine monohydrate right before an unavoidable period of acute sleep deprivation.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because when I hear creatine, I think of, those giant tubs of powder that gym goers use to get visibly bulked up.
Right, the fitness supplement.
How on earth is a muscle-building supplement saving my logic processing at 3 a.m. in an airport terminal?
We have to clearly distinguish between chronic muscle building and acute cognitive patching.
Okay, lay it out for me.
Yes, athletes use creatine to store energy in muscle tissue. But remember earlier when we talked about the prefrontal cortex, your logic and nuance center?
Yeah, the heavy lifting part.
It runs heavily on a molecule called ATP. ATP is pure cellular energy. Under the severe stress of sleep deprivation, the brain experiences something called mild hypoxia.
Hypoxia, like altitude sickness.
Similar concept, but at a cellular level. It literally means the brain is experiencing a lower than normal level of oxygen and energy availability. It is rapidly running out of ATP.
Oh, wow.
Creatine acts as a rapid energy buffer, a phosphate reserve. It steps in and stabilizes the ATP supply in the brain, preventing a complete cognitive crash.
It's basically an emergency backup generator for your brain's logic center.
Precisely. There was a double-blind crossover trial in Germany that proved this. They kept 29 healthy adults awake for 21 straight hours.
It sounds brutal.
It is. The group that took a moderate dose of creatine retained up to 12% more of their cognitive performance. That's their logic, their language processing, and their reaction time compared to the placebo group.
And I noticed in the research that individuals with naturally lower baseline creatine levels, like vegans and vegetarians, experienced an even more dramatic preservation of their mental clarity.
Because their neurological fuel tanks were running closer to empty to begin with due to their diet.
That makes perfect sense.
The creatine mitigated the immediate stress load of that hypoxia. But I must caution everyone listening, this is only a temporary patch.
Right.
It is a life raft to hold on to executive function during acute exhaustion.
Right. It does not replace the fundamental sleep architecture or clear the metabolic debris the way true sleep does. It's an emergency tool.
Exactly.
Okay, we have covered a massive amount of physical inputs today. We've talked about lifting heavy iron, balancing on one leg, managing our light exposure, taking D3 and K2, and using chemical buffers like creatine.
It's a lot.
But our sources point to one final protocol, the ultimate override. It happens entirely between your ears.
This brings us to the counterclockwise protocol. The objective here is to cultivate a youthful mindset by prioritizing play.
Play, like kids play.
Yeah. Actually revisiting old hobbies, dancing, playing video games, and actively visualizing a younger, vibrant version of your body functioning optimally.
Now, I want to be really careful here so we don't sound crazy to the listener. Are we actually saying that simply playing pretend and thinking youthful thoughts changes objective biological markers?
I know.
Because that sounds a little bit like magic.
This raises an important question about how we define the boundaries of the body. It isn't magic. It is the hard science of psychoneuroimmunology.
Psychoneuroimmunology, that is a mouthful. Break that down for me.
It is the study of how your mind, your nervous system, and your immune system all talk to each other in real time.
Okay.
They are intrinsically linked. When you think affirmative, youthful thoughts, or when you engage in genuine play, you instantaneously shift your hormones and your neurotransmitters.
Instantaneously.
Yes. You actively downregulate the stress chemistry, that cortisol and adrenaline we discussed earlier, and by doing so, you objectively improve your immune function and physical vitality.
Wow.
You dismantle negative, self-fulfilling biological prophecies.
Which brings us right back to the unbelievable study we mentioned at the very beginning of the show. Dr. Ellen Langer's famous 1979 counterclockwise study at Harvard.
Yes. Researchers took a group of elderly men in their late 70s and 80s and put them in an isolated retreat that was retrofitted to look exactly like the 1950s.
It's just such a cool concept.
The magazines, the radio shows playing, the furniture, everything was from decades earlier.
Right.
For 1 week, they lived in this space and were instructed to act as if they were currently the men they were back in 1959. They talked about historical events as if they were happening right now in the present tense.
And the results after just 7 days are what completely blow my mind.
They are truly staggering. In just 1 week, researchers measured objective improvements in their vision, their hearing, their manual dexterity, their joint flexibility, and even their IQ scores.
In 1 week, from just changing their environment and mindset?
Yes. Furthermore, independent observers were shown photos of these men from before and after the 1-week trial. Based solely on their appearance in the photos, the observers consistently guessed the men were over a decade younger than their actual biological age.
That is unbelievable.
They had visibly, physically transformed their appearance and their physical capabilities without a single medication or medical intervention.
Just by changing the signals their environment was sending to their brains, which then changed the signals their brains sent to their bodies. It really does bring everything full circle.
It does.
The brain and body aren't just connected, they're constantly having an intimate conversation.
A continuous loop.
So, if we synthesize this ultimate cheat sheet for vitality for everyone listening, you need to lift heavy to force your prefrontal cortex to clear out metabolic waste using lactate.
Right.
You need to stand on one leg while the kettle boils to keep your brain's 3D map of your body sharp.
Yeah.
Check your hair or eye to stop the microstresses from blowing out your nervous system's engine.
Absolutely.
Anchor your morning sunlight in your daily D3 to set your biological clocks, and get those evening lights as dim as possible. Keep some creatine in your emergency travel bag for those unavoidable sleepless nights. And above all, no matter your chronological age, never stop playing.
It is entirely about taking conscious control of the inputs. Every choice you make is a biological signal. Which brings up something for you to consider today as we wrap up.
I love this part.
Given how profoundly the physical environment in that 1950 study dictated the biological age and the physical capability of those men, take a moment and look around the room you are sitting in right now. Is the environment you've built for yourself silently signaling your brain to age faster? Or is it telling your body to stay young?
Boy, what an incredible question to leave on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep experimenting, keep questioning your own protocols, and we will catch you next time.